Department of Behavioral Health Care, Developmental Disabilities and Hospitals, Article 20 on the Local Agricultural and Seafood Act grants, and Article 24, the restricted receipts. At this time, I'm going to ask Linda Healy, one of our fiscal analysts, to take us through Article 21.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. As you just mentioned, for Article 21, which relates to the Department of BHDDH, it designates the agency to be responsible for coordinating, planning, managing, implementing, and reporting on the state's substance abuse policies. It also co-designates BHDDH with the Executive Office to administer the federal funds and to calculate the state's maintenance of effort towards the substance abuse block grant that it receives annually. This designation is required by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. It's needed to meet the match on that federal block grant, the Substance Abuse Block Grant. BHDDH was able to count Medicaid funds when those funds were in its budget, and as some committee members may remember, those funds were transferred to OHHS. So this allows BHDDH to continue to count those funds that were transferred to OHHS. And it also the co-designation allows for the continued use of those Medicaid funds as a match to the block grant, substance abuse block grant.
And Mr.
John's
Chairman,
going to take us through the Local Agricultural and Seafood Act.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Article 20 does relate to the Local Agriculture and Seafood Act. It was created by the 2012 Assembly. That law had funding for local agriculture and seafood grants that are intended to promote the local industries. The program is currently supported by private donations and general revenues. For example, there was $100,000 in general revenues in the FY 2016 budget for the program. The article would expand the legislative intent of the Act. It adds a provision concerning the fishing industry's participation in policy and regulatory development, and it would authorize grants of up to $50,000 for that purpose. Also, Article 20 creates a permanent funding source to the fund. It would shift Deepwater Wind's lease payments from general revenues to the fund. That'd be a $150,000 loss to general revenues annually. The governor's FY 2017 budget includes $100,000 for the local ag and seafood grants. $50,000 of it's not budgeted, but the budget office has indicated that that was inadvertent. Regarding those lease payments, the Coastal Resources Management Council has a 25-year lease agreement with Deepwater Wind. It's for $150,000 a year, or the amount from a rent formula from the federal government, whichever's greater. And as I mentioned before, the lease payments are currently deposited as general revenues. Article 20 is similar to legislation that was proposed last year, and it would also be exempt from the state's indirect cost recovery charge that you hear about in Article 24.
And Chantel, let's take us through Article 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Article 24 relates to restricted receipts. You typically see this one every year, and currently all revenues received by the state are considered general revenues unless it is specified in law. Restricted receipts have to be authorized, or a 10% indirect surcharge is charged unless it is exempted or prohibited. The article adds 3 accounts to the list to be exempt from the 10% surcharge. It's the Local Agriculture and Seafood Fund, the DMV Modernization Project, and the Rhode Island Statewide Communications Network that would be funded with Google settlement funds. The accounts or authority, as I said, must be exempt or must exist in current law. Article 20 you heard about, which deals with the Local Agriculture and Seafood Fund. Google settlement funds, by nature, they are exempt from the 10% surcharge, and the DMV account surcharge, which is funded with a $1.50 surcharge on all transactions at the registry, is currently exempt, or the receipts are limited to just use on debt and the project costs. It appears that this was done to avoid funds that would be deposited into the account from settlement to make sure that they are used for project costs. And this concludes the presentation. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thanks. I want to thank all 3 of you for presentation this afternoon. Are there any questions of the members of the staff? Yes, Representative Morgan.
And explaining. Can you tell me the Local Agriculture and Seafood Act? I'm really not very familiar with that. So would you explain to me what it does? What are we spending the money on?
It goes back to a 2012 law. There was a Local Agriculture and Seafood Grants program that was created. There was also a fund within the law that would be used for example, private donations or other restricted receipts. would be used on. And there's a committee that makes selections on DEMs on it, and they award the grants. I think, if memory serves, individual grants can go up to $20,000, but for various agriculture and seafood
Is it to
projects.
promote our seafood?
That's the intention of the law.
So we promote it outside of this state?
I believe so. It's intended to promote, my understanding at least, it's intended to promote in the state and out of the state. I don't know if DEM's here to testify. I wouldn't want to. That's my understanding at least.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
The department is here to testify, so there'll be. Representative Russo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oops, sorry. Just a quick question. Do we know how much is still left in the Google settlement fund?
I can look into that for you and get back to you on that.
Because that is strictly for police
Yes,
cars
exactly.
and...
Not for supplementing, but was over 60 million or so, but I can get that for you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Well, yes, part of the funds are in, I have the Attorney General's office's budget of the 60 million, and I think about 10 million have been spent. It's in state police, the National Guard, and the Attorney General's office, and money has been spent. I believe the largest amount has been in the Attorney General's office, and that's about $10 million, and they've purchased a building.
And there were also some communities that did receive Google monies, East Providence and North Providence.
Right, that was through the separate, right, and we can get an updated list for you on how the money's been spent throughout all the agencies that have received the funding.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. And Representative Ruggiero?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. Linda, do you know if there are any changes in the dollars for the local communities when it comes to the substance abuse prevention? I know both Jamestown and Middletown, which I represent, have funding to do prevention. Are those dollars the same?
In the current year, yes, those dollars are the same. There's a $900,000 to support the entire program for the substance abuse. In 17, those awards have not been made yet, but they have been made in 16, and I can verify and get you the updated list of all the municipalities that have the grant awards.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentations. And I'm going to ask the administration to come up. Tom Mullaney is here, and whoever you would like to bring up with you. Yeah, we'll start with Article 21. Director Montanero's here.
Got to remind myself which article that was.
Good afternoon, Director. Tom?
I think Linda explained it pretty well. It's basically a technical change in this article to allow the use of certain funds that had been transferred a couple of years ago to OHHS to be counted still as match. The director probably can explain a little further as what the necessity of that is.
Good evening. Afternoon, I'm sorry.
I think that Linda did a very good job explaining that SAMHSA provides us with the substance abuse block grant, and because they have a maintenance of effort requirement, we look at all of the payments that we make for the purposes of substance abuse prevention and treatment, and we're able to claim those as a state match. Because many of those payments are through Medicaid and those funds are in a different department, they require the SAMHSA designated state authority, single state authority, which has been BHDDH, to only count what is within our departmental budget. This is coming up in other states as well as Rhode Island, and so the solution that SAMHSA has put forth is the co-designation of the state authority between the department that is designated as the program lead, which is our department, and the department that houses Medicaid. And Ohio has done it. I think 5 other states are doing it, and they've accepted our proposal to do it. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of the director? No? Director, thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate coming this evening. So that will conclude our discussion on Article 21. And now we'll go to Article 20.
Thank you.
And Director
Director Coit is here for Article 20.
And Terry is coming up with it also. afternoon, Director. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. You ready? I believe you all have a copy of this, which in part answers Representative Morgan's question. This should be there. So this is the first year of funding. So just briefly, the Local Agriculture and Seafood Act was enacted several years ago. We're in the third year of the program. Why is DEM involved? We oversee the Department of Agriculture. I'm here with the Chief of Agriculture, Ken Ayers. We also manage the commercial fishing ports, commercial fisheries, and I chair the Seafood Marketing Collaborative. It was determined that these small grants to food-related businesses were really hard to find and catalytic when it came to growing food-related businesses. We've had a study done by URI that shows that we have over 16,000 jobs in what we call green industries, which are food-related and agriculture. And the grant program is wildly oversubscribed. It's a small program. It's been matched more than 1-to-1 each year by private dollars. And we just did the latest round. We got 71 applications for $1.14 million, all to allocate $220,000 in grants. The projects range from a mushroom company to marketing underutilized seafood, to we've been using the funds to help with this promotion of Rhode Island seafood. To respond to the question, it's both to identify seafood that's landed, harvested, in the case of aquaculture in Rhode Island, as a brand that people look for. People want to support local businesses. They want to buy fresh local food. So the program itself, it's, I think, been wildly successful. You have funded it 3 years in a row with general revenues. This year, the article includes a $50,000 grant opportunity to support commercial fishing, and the idea of using the lease payments from the submerged lands came from the fishing industry, with a view towards looking at a private lease and a public resource being put back into public good. And that would provide a sustainable source of funding for this program.
Thank you, Director. One question I have on the intent of the article is to expand the fishing industry participation in policy regulatory development. Could you explain to us what you mean by that?
Sure. And there's also some other great witnesses here who will speak to that. As you might imagine, the folks involved in the commercial fishing industry are out fishing. And with whether it's renewable energy projects that affect where they fish, climate change, some of the Byzantine group of federal and state regulations, having an opportunity to participate more in that whole sphere of things that are affecting their industry is something they're looking to do. And that by having this money come and be and provide in a grant form would allow them to do, whether it's research, policy making, allow them to participate more in this other set of issues that affect their industry. And we would be overseeing the grant program. And let me just mention one other item. The Rhode Island Food Policy Council has worked with us to put forward, and you'll hear from Ken Payne, who chairs that, a diverse group of panelists who review the grant applications and who represent the fishing and the farming industry.
Will some of that money be used to hire lobbyists?
I do not believe we would be using grant money to hire lobbyists, but we would be setting up regulations and creating a program for that grant money.
Well, I hope you know
That's
you
not,
can come before us another time to talk to us, certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Representative Tanzi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming today. When I was running for office for about 2 years prior, I represent the Port of Galilee, and there's a lot of, the bulk of the fishing industry fishes out of Galilee, so I thought it was very important to understand it. And I know that I attended, I want to say close to 100 regulatory meetings over those 2 years. And so the burden that is placed on folks who are out fishing and who, depend on that as their means of making enough money, is onerous. How many meetings a month between the federal, the state? Like you said, when the wind sighting came in, when we were doing the SAMP, all of those things, on average, how many would you say meetings there are a month? There's each different fishery, whether it's dragging? I mean, can you just give us a couple of titles of some of these meetings so that people can understand how difficult it is to fish and remain engaged in the regulatory process that actually controls what you're able to catch, when you're able to catch it? I mean, they go from the inches of the fish that you can catch to the pounds to the number. So just a little bit so that the committee can understand what the fishing industry is up against.
Sure. And Chris Brown, who's a commercial fisherman, just mentioned his family calls him Meeting Man. So between the local, our state level Marine Fisheries Council, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, which deals with migratory species in state territorial waters, and the New England Fishery Management Council, as well as the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council, which deals with the federal waters, the fishing community, who are stakeholders engaged in these processes, are going to hundreds of meetings a year, as are our staff. They're in the evenings, or we try to make them in the evenings, but they're on top of everything else. Then you put the ocean stamp process and the stakeholder. I mean, it's continuous. So one of the so we have 100 million pounds of seafood coming into the state, $75 million of ex-vessel value. We want people out fishing, but we also want to have some seed money to help with marketing, to help deal with the challenges associated with navigating this whole policy world.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Representative Ruggiero.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Director, and everyone from DEM. It's obviously a very important issue since I represent Jamestown and Middletown, and we do have a lot of fishing and agriculture. And this was a bill that came before us last year that I sponsored because the industries are so important to the state. The LASA grants. I think the agriculture, and Ken would know more, is about $2.5 billion in this state, and the commercial fishing is about $200 million rather. So I think that, what DEM is doing to support the fishermen and certainly the agriculture in our state is really important. And as you had said, not a whole lot of dollars, but many, applications, so it's oversubscribed. And I just hope that we, move forward with this because it's important for our state and two very important sectors. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Norton.
Thank you. This is more a softball to DEM. I think that you deserve accolades for your very successful efforts in United States lead with direct consumer sales. And maybe you want to elaborate on that. That didn't happen overnight. That happened through planning and involvement of all the parties. We didn't used to have a food policy council. These things have been happening with our lead university, and this is an outstanding example of a research university with the people of Rhode Island, with the state departments, and you are to be commended for leading this effort, and I believe you're the envy of the whole country in how you've managed this.
Thank you very much, Vice Chairman. We are ranked third nationally in the percent of farms that sell directly to the public, and we have over 50 farmers markets now. They've grown rapidly. If you would, I'd like to ask Ken just to say a few words. He is really the person who has led this effort over the last 15 years or so, and he's phenomenal.
Well, thank you. And I think DEM has tried over years to create an ecosystem which allows business to grow. And our focus in this case is on seafood and agriculture. And it is an evolution. It's not an overnight success. And that platform includes many things. It also includes a lot of public-private partnerships. And there's folks in this room that are part of that as well, Food Policy Council and nonprofit funders and whatnot. When we looked at the landscape going forward, we recognized that one gap was small-scale startup funding. And we worked with General Assembly members, and Director Coit led the charge there to create the LASSET program, which has been way oversubscribed in 3 years and continues to be. And that's part of the puzzle, and there's many things going forward. URI just, for example, announced the first Sustainable Ag and Food Curriculum bachelor's degree program, which starts in September. Bit by bit, Rhode Island is moving forward and being a leader, and I think the fact that we've created a sustainable base during our tough times economically, in the past 10 years, agriculture grew, and that's because there's a platform behind it. So we appreciate your support. It's been continuously. These are legislative efforts that we've worked together on, and I think there's a bright road ahead for us.
Thank you. Representative Morgan.
Thank you. What's the average size of these grants? I'm reading them, so I'm getting an idea of what you're using the money for. But what's the average size? They're not very large, then.
No, they're not, and they're meant to be. The cap is 20,000, and so they're anywhere from 1 to 20.
And so this is adding another 150,000 to it. So what's the total pot going to be? Because you've got a lot of people looking.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd love to have this expanded, but because in total, by getting the match from the private funds, we've been able to give away about $200,000 to $230,000 a year. But we could easily give away $1 million a year, and it's something. And in each case, we're a fantastic little place with incubators, and in each place, it's been helping a business test something and grow. So I think if we have a sustainable supply of funding, we can work around it successfully, but we could do more in the way of economic development if we had more funding. But I hope you'll support this.
There. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Director. Let's see. Is it Lynn Spinella, Ken Payne, and Sarah Schumann? Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Lynn Spinella from Rhode Island Farm Bureau. And Farm Bureau works very closely with DEM, and we are a past recipient of a LASA grant. And we hope to be a recipient of a LASA grant in the future as well. But this program has helped Farm Bureau, for example, reach out through social media, which we didn't have the capacity to do prior to receiving the LASA grant. So it's very beneficial, and it's a tremendous asset to the future of farming also. We are trying to develop new markets, finding new markets for Rhode Island food, and there's so many out there, and the LASA grants have been tremendous in making that happen. So any aid that can be given to this program to keep it going for indefinitely would certainly be very helpful to farming in Rhode Island and agriculture in general. So we'd appreciate your consideration.
Thank you very much. Mr. Payne, good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to talk about two things. First of all, I chair the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. I'm the elected chairperson of that council. And I can address very specifically the relationship between private philanthropy and the LASA program. The second thing I want to cover is the legitimacy of using the lease payments to support these activities. To the first item, private philanthropy looks upon Rhode Island as one of the places to be with regard to developing food systems. We are seen as a leader. And so that the two most exciting jurisdictions in New England are Vermont and Rhode Island on food issues. That's stunning success. And part of that success is that lots of people, many of them young, want to get into these activities. They want to. But the hardest thing for a young person getting into it, or somebody coming from less than great means, is capital to go from microscopic to something that earns some real money. And so what LASA does is it helps that bridge from very small to sort of medium scale, helps you bridge. And it does it by favoring things that are innovative and that can be replicated among other people. So somebody tries it out, and we say, okay, try this out, and then it can then be the information shared. Private philanthropy has recognized that gap as something it wants to help fill. So they provide funding through the Rhode Island Food Policy Council to match the state funds dollar for dollar, and to provide support for the administration of the program, to process all the applications that come in, that do the PR, that print the reports that you have before you. So the state dollars go out the door, and a lot of the administrative cost is supported by private philanthropy. This is a working partnership, and they're thrilled by it, and they stayed with it, and it's a success story. But they would also like to see some continuity for the future. Now to move on to my second set of observations, which I'll go through very quickly. The land under the ocean is held in public trust. It's public trust land. And it's held for the benefit of all the people of Rhode Island, not those just in coastal communities. It's a public trust for all the people of Rhode Island. So that when you sort of alienate a portion of that public trust land by putting things for wind energy on it, how do you make sure that people in Cumberland as well as Charleston benefit? And so you take something that comes from leasing a natural asset of the state, the public trust lands, and take that revenue into growing other natural resource-based economies that are found throughout Rhode Island, including in our urban communities. And in our urban communities, agriculture is increasingly important. Increasingly important. Now, in the many hats that I have worn over the years, I was the chairperson of the stakeholders process for the Oceans Special Area Management Plan. And in that proceeding, having the fishermen go along with doing offshore wind was a huge victory for Rhode Island. It's why Rhode Island has blown Massachusetts out of the water. Cape Wind stalls and we go forward. And it was in part because fishermen were being treated fairly. Let me be clear about that. The SAMP process, the ocean SAMP process, treated them fairly. The problem they face is that they're in such a heavily regulated environment that meetings go on and on and on forever and almost never occur when they need to be out on the water. They aren't scheduled. And furthermore, fishermen do need to sleep. So that it's important for them, in order to continue to receive that fair treatment, to actually have somebody that can go to the meetings for them, participate in them, and report back. And that they can say, this is our person at the table. When you're dealing with all the complexities with offshore wind development and other things that are affecting the fisheries, which Rhode Island fishermen use. So that's the purpose of that. I worked on legislation previously that would have used the lease payments just for the benefit of fishermen. I think it's a wonderful outcome to have it benefit all Rhode Island by supporting LASA as well. So this is a great budget article. It's one of those diamonds in the rough kind of budget articles, and I hope you are as excited by it as I am. This is a good thing that is before you. I know it's kind of like arcane provisions of law, and people won't get it, but its underlying ideas are really gorgeous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Your enthusiasm is catching. Ms. Schuman?
Thank you. My name is... it was on already.
Well,
it's good now. Nope. My name is Sarah Schumann, and I'm from the fishing industry. I oversee a small nonprofit called Eating with the Ecosystem that the mission of that nonprofit is to diversify our consumption of local seafood. So not just promote eating local, but to promote eating a representative variety of what we have here locally, instead of just sort of cherry picking what we like, which may not even be available anymore as our waters are changing. We were a recipient of a LASA grant this year. We're currently working on it, and that's why I'm here to advocate for this program. We received a grant to connect local seafood into the local food pantry distribution system, which is currently, 2 dots that are not connected, and we're working to connect them. We see it as a win-win for both the fishing industry and food insecure Rhode Islanders because, as I mentioned before, there's a number of seafood products that are landed here in Rhode Island that are not consumed here locally. And the big barrier is sort of a lack of education, awareness, and familiarity with those species. So we figured if we could, use the food pantry distribution system as a ready-made market for them, some of those species, put them in the hands of local Rhode Islanders, let them learn how to use them, that's one way to start building that market. Obviously, it's also a win-win for those consumers because they're getting a nutritious, local, and culturally appropriate protein source. We've applied for another LASA grant this coming year to do a local Fishes Global Dishes project where we tap into one of our richest assets in Rhode Island for teaching for local seafood education, which is our immigrant community. A lot of times these are communities or cultures that have a lot of experience using whole fish and using a wide array of fish. And we think that the rest of Rhode Island has a lot to learn from them in terms of how we use our local fish. So we hope to be successful in that application as well. One of the reasons that we keep applying to LASA every year is that as a very small volunteer-run nonprofit, we fall through the cracks of a lot of bigger funders. And this program is willing to work with us. They're not, just going to throw our application in the wastebasket because, they don't think they can take us seriously. They know us personally, in Rhode Island, we all know each other, and that helps a lot. And so it's really been a godsend for us to have this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much for testimony. Thank all of you for coming this evening. We appreciate it. Christopher Brown and is it Julius Calloway? I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I am a commercial fisherman of 40 years. To say it has been a journey would be an understatement. Renewable energy is a logical first step to dealing with the effects of climate change. Rhode Island has taken it to heart. As a state, we're moving dutifully in that direction with purpose and clarity. Our contribution to the development of solutions to this problem is incomplete if energy is where we end our journey. An equally damning tenet to climate change is compromised productivity of our food systems. The LASA grant program looks to strengthen our local food source for all of us. Our bays, our rivers, our oceans, our fields and plains become less dependable over the course of time. National food security is one of the issues with which we will deal along our way towards a permanent solution to climate change. We are blessed with a rich and diverse fishery that is capable of feeding millions if properly managed. Sustainable fisheries are the goal, but there are few definitions and no roadmap on how to get there. We came upon the wind farm project several years ago. I'm the president of the East Farm Commercial Fisheries Center. We are 10 organizations of fishing organizations within the state. We were not certain at the time that we could survive it. We didn't know what it meant for us. We were certain that we could not defeat it. They say that patriotism is the last desperate act of a scoundrel, so we decided to try to work with it. We raptured immediately around the concept of not getting our rear end beaten in public over this issue. because the physics of it just did not invite us to a brawl. We were tiny food producers, and this was a national initiative which had taken root in our backyard. We didn't want to fight that fight. So we reasoned over the course of time that we were a logical partner in all of this. We were renewable protein. That is how we prefer to describe ourselves in these, the context of this conversation. We transitioned over the course of 2 years into a group of men who were dedicated to contributing to a greater societal outcome from our involvement. Our own perspectives on sustainability and national food security became clearer, and it became a great mission for us. We think there is a profound connection between renewable energy and renewable food sources. They happen in the same space. One is blessed with great financial wealth. The other one, on its road to sustainability, has been asked to take deep cuts. They are in our backyard. They do represent an inconvenience, to put it mildly. So we think it is a fair transaction. We believe that a sustainable fishery holds a great respect for the overarching goals of society, goals that extend far beyond the pursuit of our daily needs. This industry nationally is growing to realize its role. It is not just to make a few bucks. We, as old men, have an obligation to provide for this nation. We take that very seriously. We do not believe that there is a greater peacetime demonstration of patriotism than the responsible utility of our nation's and our state's resources. You do not inherit the ocean from your father, you borrow it from your grandchildren. We believe this. It's etched on our heart. We believe that sustainability is a function of our willingness to invest in our own intellectual capacity and problem-solving infrastructure. The money that we would receive from this LASA program would go into funding communication capacity, partnership building capacity, just everything that would make us a more effective human system. Fisheries, commercial fisheries, are a human system. They're not even about fish. They're about people. And it's how you excite people with the prospect of big dreams that makes them perform great acts. And that's what we're trying to do. This bill represents an investment in the maturation of our sustainability and takes us steps closer. Our dedication to these enlightened perspectives affords us regional food security, prosperity, sound and effective resource management, and allows us to retool the culture of commercial fishing and elevate our status to something more respected than it was a few years ago. We have become a nation that no longer builds great things, that builds great structures, that builds great institutions. We are reluctant to dream great dreams. We should not will ourselves to mediocrity. My generation built great things. The guys that lead this industry are older men. We came from a generation when we built phenomenal things and exceeded the wildest dreams of man. We want to do that through our fishery. We want to be able to guarantee national food security, local food strength, prosperity, and a future for our children and our grandchildren and yours. So it doesn't seem like a lot of money. 50,000. I'm not talking about the 150, just the 50 that would be earmarked for organizational development within the industry. But it is the catalyst to the glue that we need to hold this together. I am the president of the Seafood Harvesters of America. Also, 17 organizations, the largest groups in the nation. The eyes of the nation are on us. This little bill has profound implications nationally. Every organization that I deal with, from Alaska to Maine, wonders, how are you going to fight the wind farms? I tell them, we're not going to fight them. We're going to partner with them and do something great. This bill allows that to happen. We need a little bit of money on a continuing basis in order to do great things. We work for free. It's not for us. It goes into technological support. It goes into computers. It goes into everything we need to make our local knowledge an asset to the existing system. So I would implore you to usher this bill as far as it has to go and get it across the finish line. It's a great, great little piece of work. And it has huge implications nationally for our national food security. And don't forget that as our national food security should become threatened, our ability to provide millions of people meals around the world is diminished. This goes far beyond Rhode Island. You know, I'm really shifting gears on you here. A little while ago, we were talking about small entrepreneurial businesses, but this is bigger. This is much bigger. Climate change is a huge issue, and we need to do all we can do to create a huge benefit for everyone within this state and the nation as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the committee.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Julius Kolawole. I'm the president of African Alliance of Rhode Island, and I just want to congratulate and thank you for many of the points you made.
Thank you.
Dedicated, strong, working for the fishing industry. I do live in South Providence, and to many of you, you probably know South Providence has been referred to as a food desert. My organization have 14 women in the community garden. They're all Africans and other minorities. We grow, what is unique about us is we grow about 8 different African vegetables in the state, in South Providence, most of them. We have taken them to the market because of LASA. We got some money this last funding cycle. We're just grateful to what this has done for us. We are grateful and look forward to what, if we are successful being a recipient of the next, what it can do for us. We'll be able to take these women, 7 of them, to a farmer's market. Because of LASA, we were able to go to a winter market this year. We took 4 of them to that winter market. You have to see people being happy because a little money in their pocket, little money. For women, some of we call them growers, not referring to them as women. When they talk about, yes, we're able to buy soap, things every one of us take for granted. When they talk about they were able to buy orange juice because of the few dollars they make from this market, because LASA made that possible, we have new market. In the last couple of weeks, what LASA has also done is there's a particular couple of things we grow. We call it garden egg. I don't know if you are familiar with any of this. Or bitter ball. It's another name. Okay. What we've done is we made products out of that. That is grown in South Providence, an African vegetable, grown in South Providence, sold in the market. Now, products out of it. Today, as I speak to you, we've had 3 taste testing of that. We are looking at the entrepreneurship of this. We are looking at economic impact of this, not even talking about the health impact of this. What small money can do for a food desert community. One more point. Last year, I think it was September, October, we worked with CRC, that's Coastal Resource Center, an arm of URI. For the first time, we went clam harvesting. Let me repeat that. It sounds funny because we've never done it. Never. Okay? So I wrote a small grant and we got about 1,000 from another source. The gist of the grant simply said, we live in a food desert. This state is called Ocean State. How about bringing the ocean to the desert? Okay? So there is a lot LASA can do for a food desert community. It has done quite a bit already. Those growers are damn happy. Very, very happy. If I'm not here to tell you this, you won't know. But very, very happy. We are in a new market. We are a new product. If any of you have the time, please come by. Winter market is in Pawtucket. The last Saturday of March, we're going to be doing a cooking demonstration. Okay? You will get to taste those relish that comes from this particular product, crop. You also get to taste some of the fish that we're going to be making. We have 3 chefs, a Caucasian, a Latino, and an African. LASA has been wonderful to us. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to come before the committee this evening. We appreciate it. The last article is Article 24. Tom, if you want to come back up. Any comments on this one?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Article 24, as was stated in the overview by staff, is just requesting to exempt 3 accounts from the indirect cost recovery. One of them is the LASA account, as just talked about. The main purpose of exempting that one is just to have all the $150,000, if this were to be approved, go towards the grants and not siphon 10% off to the general fund. The other 2 accounts, the first one is the DMV modernization project. As you probably have heard, you heard yesterday a little bit about the RIMS project and the status of that. Part of the ability to complete that project this year was an agreement with the developer, Hewlett-Packard, that they're actually going to provide $3 million to the state to help support that project. That money we're asking to be taken into a restricted account, and again, instead of having some of it siphoned off to the general fund, have it all maintained just for the project, so therefore be exempt from the 10%. The last account is the RISCON infrastructure repairs and equipment replacement account. This actually is right now is more or less a placeholder. The hope is that we will be able to get some of the Google money allocated for this project. A request was submitted to the Department of Justice last year by the state police. They had asked at the time to defer making a decision on that, and we think it was related to the issues in Washington where they actually put a hold on all of the sort of this forfeiture funds. I think they siphoned some of it off to help balance the federal budget at the time, but that program is back up and running, and things are being approved, so we're hopeful that they will approve the allocation of some of that money for this purpose. And as with the other Google funds, we have established restricted accounts in the agencies that are receiving them and have exempted those from the 10% in order for the money. That's sort of under the federal regulations that it can't be used for anything else. So that's the reason that account is included this year.
Thank you, Tom. I just got to comment on the RISCON system. That's a very important system. That's the radio system that allows departments to communicate with each other. Unfortunately, during the station nightclub fire, we found that different departments that had responded could not communicate with each other. But this RISCON system is very important, not only for fire protection, but also police protection. And it's one. I think the RISCON system is the #1 system that's used by the state police and some of our other local departments. And even like in my community, we can communicate with people, other departments throughout the state. So it's very, very important. So thank you for including that one in here. So, any questions of Tom on this? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That will conclude our hearing on Article 24 and our agenda this evening. So thank you all for coming.
Oh, I'm ready for another 5 hours.
You were so